Very happy to be back with another young Indian. Hello, everyone. Good to be back with you. Just now we have with us Prantik Mitra. Let's listen to him. Over to you, Prantik. Go ahead.
Hello, Professor Mathur, and hello, everyone. So, yes, I'm Prantik Mitra. I'm based out of India, and I'm currently working with Microenergy Credits as the strategy director of the company. So, I've been with this company for 5 years now, and the company dates back to the early ages of clean development mechanism back in 2007 when it was formed. Uh, the primary objective of the organization was to empower every low-income rural people in developing LDCs, developing countries, to empower them with clean energy technologies and help them shift away from fossil fuels. Now, the company primarily operates under the modalities and apparatus of the carbon market. So going a little back to what the origination of the carbon market starts from, that is from the Kyoto Protocol, 1997, when all the parties came together, decided that there should be a partnership mechanism between the developed countries and countries of emerging economies and developing economies for transfer of technologies, for transfer of finances, and help support these developing economies to grow much faster, whereas also help the developed countries transfer these finances to support the causes of the developing countries and also pave them towards the path of renewable energy, which at that point, back in 1997 or early 2000, was very high priced. Even if you see the back in 2012 to 2016 in India, the prices of solar were soaring somewhere at around 16 rupees per unit. That's what the discounts were signing the PPAs. And you have to compete with a PPA of coal, which was probably somewhere around the range of 3 rupees per unit.
Okay, hang on, Pratik. Let me just explain to the viewers uh, what a PPA is. PPA is a power purchase agreement, and the power company, the discom, or is actually buying power from another source. And what Pratik is saying is that you could get coal at 3 rupees per unit, whereas solar was coming in at 16, right? So it was a hard sell for solar because obviously the discount would prefer to buy it at 3 rupees than at 16. So there's a huge gap there. So I just wanted to, because PPA is not a term that most people know. It's power purchase agreement.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Okay,
Agreed.
good. Let's continue.
Sure. So as Dr. Mathur was talking about, that it is to bridge this gap of that 12 rupees, 13 rupees between these two different sets of purchase power agreements from two different sources of energy. And the government or different organizations, countries came together, they decided we would have the countries do internal compliances, something that the government of India was previously doing, the PAC scheme, where certain organizations were compliant to meet certain renewable energy obligations or reducing their GHG emissions from the three different sources. And there was also a global coalition where brought about the carbon market, primarily the first sources of private finances being transferred into this development of clean energy or projects like agriculture, the projects that relates to climate change mitigation and also help support certain adaptation practices. That is where the origin of the carbon market means. In simple terms, the developed countries or the corporates who are obligated or voluntarily want to purchase uh, emission reduction certificates can invest in these projects which are set up in developing countries or LDCs so that they can offset their own emission. Now, there is always, some people always ask, so does all carbon credits means offsetting, or there is always a term called greenwashing, which is basically you're trying to create a green label, an artificial green label of your entire business. Uh, So I want to break that myth. Carbon credits, not all carbon credits are offsets. Carbon credits are primarily made up of two components. One can be the allowances, where the governments will have certain limitations. It usually happens in cap and trade, where you have a cap of emissions, and on above or below that, you can trade these permissible carbon allowances, which can happen when you buy these from carbon standards. Previously, there was UNFCCC's Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM standards. Later on, the EU has their own standards, EU ETS. South Korea has its own standards. India is today coming up with the new standards called the India Carbon Market. And then there are the voluntary components. So the compliance components usually make up most of these projects which qualify for these compliance allowances within that country's ETS emission trading system goes into carbon allowances. And those credits which are qualified as exported from geographical boundaries beyond the the territory of the ETS of that country are called offsets. It can be within a regulated body like the CDM's one, or UNFCCC might come up with Article 6.4 in a couple of years, or it could also be the voluntary market, which can be used for offsetting. So the term offset, it's not exactly greenwashing. Greenwashing happens when when you have, say, 100 tons of greenhouse gases to reduce, and you're doing all of that with carbon projects without taking any effort to create a more energy intensive or more climate friendly environment within your own business. So without doing an insetting, if you're doing an offsetting, that's when the greenwashing might come.
Okay.
And that's why most of these ETS would talk to you about there is a percentage of the component of the ETS cap that you can fulfill by buying these offset credits. Otherwise, you have to always buy the allowances, which are always priced much higher. It is usually seen that the countries with an active or a mature ETS system will have a much higher carbon price for the allowances. And then you can purchase maybe say 5% or 10% from these offsets, which are generally priced much lower. And that is where a lot of these economic comes in between the, or rather, which if I call them the development economics between the countries or their relationship. You must be hearing that the EU has now wants to come up and establish the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which primarily talks about, because in a lot of these countries like India or China or many of the developing or LDC countries, because their environmental restrictions are much less stringent than in the EU, they want to have an adjustment of the carbon price. They want the manufacturers exporting these goods for example, steel, cement. These are some of the hard to abate. Most of the hard to abate sectors falls under this CBAM category. Is they want them to take the accountability and pay the price for the emission while they are exporting this route. Now, this brings up the component of import-export differences that would happen. It will happen in India's budget indefinitely because all the exported goods are now going to have a markup over and above the prices that they were selling. So this is called as the carbon price markup if they are importing it to EU. Concerns would be for companies like Ambuja, Ultratech, who have pretty good tie-up with Holcim company. So that's one of the examples. Or if Tata wants to supply steel to a car manufacturer somewhere in Germany, they would probably have to bear an additional cost of CBAM carbon tax.
Yeah.
So this markup exactly creates a lot of problem, and there is still a lot of cloud over this, how the entire mechanism would work out, how the entire mechanism would work out once the compliance market in clean development mechanism comes in, and how the voluntary markets of the offsets and other credits will fall in. So green carbon credits, it's not exactly greenwashing. Carbon credits are actually one of the few ways that you can transfer the private funds to development causes, development projects, climate relevant projects, and those funds would otherwise be used for some other profit purposes. So that, and again, people might say that can we have, is it similar to CSR? It's not. So why corporate sustainability or corporate social responsibility, all of this ESG, these falls under all different categories. Although some companies might want to brand them under the single department, but that does not make them like synonymous to one another.
Yeah.
Carbon credits is different, ESG would be different, and the overall CSR component is different.
Yeah.
There,
Let me just add here, Prantik, that CSR is not a sale or a purchase of anything. It is a donation. Basically, it's a grant money that's flowing from a company under government rules to certain target
exactly.
beneficiaries. So it has nothing to do with the marketplace. It has nothing to do with the purchase or sale. While the
Yeah.
market that Prantik is talking about, it's a market. You're buying and selling. And it's not a government requirement to buy or sell, but it's international. And so there are other countries where the buyers of your stuff, they want certain rules, guidance, etc. They want to put certain requirements. So it's a market-based mechanism, right? And for an economist, that's always a good idea to try to use the market in whatever fashion is possible. Now, markets are, of course, prone to some problems. They are not infallible, but the market does work. Okay, so let me just start. So all the ESG and all this is not market. Carbon offsets are market. That's the point as an economist I want to add. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Right, absolutely right. And just one thing, like the government may or may not require you to purchase carbon credits. If your company is within a sector which is obligated to purchase carbon credits or falls under this compliance of the carbon market and the carbon pricing, then you will have to purchase carbon credits if you're not within the cap limit of
Right.
emissions
Right.
annually. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically a penalty that you either pay a penalty which is much higher, like 20 times the floor prices in the carbon as they go.
Okay. So what do you do?
So what we do is we initially our projects were in the CDM, and but as we all know, since 2020 was the end of the Kyoto era and transition into the Paris Agreement, COP21 Paris Agreement coming into force, and now the modalities are still working out. So till 2020 December, we were under the regulated UNFCCC CDM mechanism, developing carbon projects in India, Mongolia. In fact, we were the first carbon projects in Mongolia, and that's where the company started. And East Africa, Kenya, Uganda. So that was the scale till 2020. We, since 2007 to 2020, we had approximately 6 million households that we had impacted with clean energy products on the off-grid categories. So we do not deal with utility scale solar, or we do not deal with planting trees. We work with microfinance institutions, SACCOs in Africa, or other small self-help group organizations, which provide financing options to these low-income households who do not have the means to take a loan from a bank. And then they take the loan for the clean energy technologies like solar lights, off-grid solar lights, or a gravity-based water purifier, or efficient cooking technologies. So these are the technologies which help them, because we wanted to target the women and the children who are mostly at home, provide them with some kind of a livelihood option by helping them save money on fuel. And because of the financing option, we have seen that more and more people who they go for this financing option with microfinance, even in India, charging them somewhere between 18 to 24% interest rate, are able to save more money compared to what they would have paid in terms of buying kerosene or buying woods or coal. Those are the comparisons in India and Africa that we have done. So in
Okay.
the long run, on the entire lifespan of the clean energy technology, any of these three devices that I've talked about, which we were dealing till 2020, uh, all these options help you save money. And then there are like additional benefits. The benefits being, of course, since you're not doing using fossil fuel more, you are not emitting any pollution. So there is no indoor air pollution while using solar when you're replacing kerosene lamps with it. Or when you're using a more efficient cook stoves, you would be using it's emitting less and less pollution, and it's also taking much less fuel. So, and also gravity-based water purifier, instead of boiling the water, because in many of the rural areas, well, in most of the developing countries in India or Africa, like the quality of drinking water is scarce. The I mean, the quality of good drinking water is not there basically, and because of the scarcity of drinking clean water, they have to use their three-stone fire where they boil the water to purify them of germs so that they can drink that. Now, with that water purifiers, they don't have to anymore spend on the fuel. Now, why this mechanism worked was primarily because we did not give any of these products for free.
Yeah.
All these products followed a market-based mechanism where the consumer demand, the consumer choices of the product, the consumer demand for a particular type of technology drove the entire market. And because the consumers understood the need of those technology, they were using it continuously. Those products were never out of use. So all the carbon benefits that we can generate out of these technologies were completely then utilized rather than like having a technology which is given for free and then consumers are not using it anymore because they either want to revert back to their older technology because of their lack of awareness about the benefits, or they just don't want to use it because they never paid for it, like so they don't have any actual consumer choice for that technology in the first place.
Right. 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 Okay.
So helping them by providing them with this choice for clean energy technology and by giving them this empowerment through this awareness, we do a lot of the most of the carbon money we get. The objective is to pass it on to the end users, and we engage a lot with the end users. We continuously we have departments, we have people going there meeting, we have our partners who have weekly meetings or even every fourth night they're meeting the end users, and they are ensuring that these end users are using the products continuously. So what happens now is even after 10 years, 7 years, 10 years of giving the products are still in continuous use. There is active after sales services, maintenance support. And
Mm.
by giving them basically, as I was saying, by when you give them a choice, you empower them.
Yeah.
And with that empowerment enables them to bring about the behavioral change, which is essential for adoption of any kinds of technology in any society.
Okay. Fair enough. All right.
So,
Let's continue.
so the now as the products are as more and more people are using these products, there is you calculate how much emission reductions you're happening from your baseline technology, say for example, kerosene or wood, and then you calculate the emission reductions,
Mm.
and then you get them certified. You get it first. You need to get it verified from a third-party auditor, and then you get it certified via standards. Then you get these permissible trade certificates, which were previously called certified emission reductions,
Yeah.
which you can transfer in exchange for the carbon price that somebody is willing to pay. And there are another other types of technologies as well, of course, in the sector. There is forestry. So carbon credits can be divided into two broad categories based on the type from how the emission reduction is happening. It's either reduction, where you have a baseline emission, where emission, say for example, emission is happening under business as usual,
Okay.
and from there you're reducing it by either bringing in energy efficient technologies or bringing in more less polluting or no polluting technologies within the chain, and you're making adjustments into your BAU so that you're in the current BAU, it peaks down.
It just, you mean business as usual?
Business as usual. Under your
BAU.
baseline business as usual
Yeah.
scenario.
Yes, you.
Yeah,
I'm just holding you where people may not understand. It's business as usual.
right.
What you are
Sure,
doing
sir. Please do.
normally, right? Okay.
Not what you're doing as a normal business. The other type of technology is where you call removals. Now, removals may have, you can either calculate removals by the simple concept that if you plant a forest, there will be trees. Trees will have photosynthesis, which converts CO2 into oxygen.
Yeah.
You're absorbing CO2, which
Yeah.
is a greenhouse gas, and
Sure.
you're giving out oxygen.
Yeah.
So and that's the simple term, the simple way of doing it. The other type of removal that happens is removals through storage and sequestration,
Yeah.
is where carbon is captured and stored into an underlying layer. That layer can be a soil layer, that can be within the body of the plant, that can be geological layers deep beneath the oceans, yeah, or even subdued into synclines, where most of that's exactly how you get natural gas as well, petroleum and natural gas. So sequestration is another process of removal where you're capturing the carbon and you're storing it. Now, of course, that comes with several risks, because the biggest risk being if ever that storage faces any kind of cracking, there will be a tremendous amount of um, carbon released into the atmosphere, which will spike up the global carbon balance. And that would lead to much faster global warming scenarios. So the two categories, reductions and removals. Reductions are sometimes also called avoidance, because you are switching your technology by not allowing them to buy the dirty option, but by providing them with a cleaner option. Say, for example, today, if I'm running a car which I bought back in 2012, now after 10 years or 12 years, I would be exchanging my car, right? So the government today has given me an incentive to buy electric vehicles so that I do not go for the option of a regular diesel or a petrol engine vehicle. This scenario is called avoidance, where I am avoiding buying uh, the more polluting option because
Yeah.
I'm given certain incentives for the clean options.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the similar scenario happened to balance of that purchase power agreement with solar, where it was given $15, $16, 15, 16 rupees versus 3 rupees of coal. The government brought in several tax benefits, like accelerated depreciation was at 80%,
Yeah.
and purchase power obligations. And there were several other tax benefits on the productions, import, exports of solar, but primarily the AD played a major role because you could basically depreciate your assets at 80% rate. So these additional costing is what makes up one of the key components of carbon project. Now, what qualifies as a carbon project? Now, today somebody might ask that what kind of projects qualify as carbon projects? Do all technology projects qualify as carbon projects? All projects are not carbon projects. All clean energy projects will not be carbon projects. You have to have certain levels of cat, classifications, or more like I would say criterions to fulfill. The first criterion being it is not covered by your government's NDC, which is a government's obligation, nationally determined contributions, which every sovereign is promising to contribute to at the global stage, that my country would reduce fossil fuel emission by 40% in the next decade, for example, or my carbon intensity is basic. Carbon intensity means from your entire GDP, how it's basic. Carbon intensity is, in simple terms, amount of carbon released per GDP
Yeah,
upon your GDP rate.
right.
Total carbon released upon your GDP rate,
Yeah.
basically.
Let me
So
give an example that might be easier for people to understand. In South Africa, 90% of the electricity is produced from coal, right? So South Africa is very carbon intensive. Another country, maybe France, very little electricity is produced from coal. So in that sector, France is not carbon intensive. So you are looking at how much carbon you emit per output. GDP is, of course, one global measure. So that's how we
yeah,
measure carbon intensity. Okay, continue, Prantik, please.
sure. So these are called NDCs, nationally determined contributions, as I was talking about. These are promises. Think of these as like goodwill promises your country is making to in the international forum at at those discussion tables at the UN when the negotiations goes on. So it's like a goodwill promise. It's nobody's going to put India behind the bars if India misses the NDC, but there will be a lot of international pressures, diplomatic pressures on India to fulfill those targets, and India must do that purely on the grounds of diplomatic goodwill. Now, projects which a country is doing directly under its NDC cannot qualify as carbon credits
No, because
because
they'll happen anyway.
be-
The logic is that
yes,
they will happen
exactly,
anyway.
they would happen anyway. So this
Right.
brings to the concept of the criteria called additionality,
Right.
which says carbon projects has to be additional to business as usual. That means your project must be reducing or removing carbon emissions additional to what would have happened when the if the project was not there. There has to be additional over and above the BAU. That's why this concept of baseline is there. So, and the baseline is always determined at the current BAU level. Or there are certain methodological default values, but generally it's at the BAU level. And so there are different components of additionality. You can provide financial additionality that without carbon funding, the carbon project would not be commercially feasible. At the end of the day, it's private sector finance. You need to make the projects financially viable. That's called financial additionality. Or you can show that the technological additionality, because these kind of technologies do not exist in this country. I give you a best example is of our project in Mongolia, because back in 2007, Mongolia used to burn tons and 40, 50 kgs of coals every jerd. Jerds are basically like tents, insulating tents.
Yeah.
People live inside there with their families, they cook there and they sleep there. So they did not have the option of an efficient space heating stove or space heating option. So they were burning coal every day. There would be fire, there would be like soot all over your furnitures. People would be suffering from cough and other respiratory diseases. What we did is we worked on this project, and initially it wasn't a plan to come up with a carbon project, it just happened. We imported these technologies, worked with universities in US, got some technologies with supports from GIZ, supports from Germany and Turkey, got some technologies transported through Turkey, and we got these space heating stoves, which were first of its kind in that country. That's technological additionality.
Okay.
And then there are like several things called common practices. You can talk about common practices. You need to prove that um, the technology that you're saying and like covering under your carbon project is not a common practice in that economy. Or there you have to prove that there are political policy restrictions which is hindering the growth and adoption of that clean energy technology. So these are called the concept of additionality. So The concept of additionality forms the core of carbon market because, as I mentioned, all carbon projects has to be additional.
Yeah,
This is the primary, the prima facie rather, the prima facie. Sorry for the lack of word here, but yeah, it's the prima facie of the carbon market that
yeah, you have to
is
have, that's the basic requirement. It can't be what is already happening. It has to be something that you
yeah,
have made to happen. Okay, let's continue,
yeah.
Pratik, please.
And then there are several other components that you need to take care of. The component of permanence of
Yeah,
non-reversal.
yeah,
Permanence means the emission that you're reducing stays reduced. It does not
right,
reverse back to its previous state. For
right,
example, if and carbon is stored in the soil and that soil layer gets disturbed and there is emission of large volumes of carbon back into the atmosphere,
Mm,
that's non-permanence.
okay, yeah,
Or for reversal to baseline technologies. For example, you need to ensure that if you're giving an efficient cook stove, an electric cook stove to an end user, the end user will continuously use the electric cook stoves and not revert back to its baseline technology of using kerosene or three-stone fire to cook food again. So these are called non-permanence. And then there are other technical criterion which people need to fulfill, which are like ensuring that um, all calculations are conservative. The because it has to you can only reduce carbon that was emitting under the avoidance of the reduction scenario. You cannot reduce something that was not there in the first place. So
right,
if um, if a stove, three-stone fire, if a household was using the older wood technology and they were emitting 4 tons in a year, you can only reduce up to 4 tons by providing them with a cook stove.
correct.
You cannot claim 16 tons by
No,
showing that,
all
oh,
right,
like this would have happened. There may have been a baby born and they would have
no,
had to cook some like an extra food and that shot up your like calculations. So the concept of conservativeness is key to doing any kind of emission reduction calculation.
yeah,
And then there are several policy challenges that you need to look into the geographical scenario, market adaptation. Now, what happens after you get these carbon credits? What we do is as a company, we provide an end-to-end solution with our partners.
okay,
We work with you to identify the technologies that your clients need because we come up with long history of working with development finances right at the start of when microfinance was started by Muhammad Yunus and Muhammad Yusuf. Since then, the DNA of MEC was there because our CEO that time was helping them set up the clean energy portfolio, helping Grameen Foundation do that, Grameen Banks in Bangladesh. So that is when the entire DNA of MEC has started. And from there, what we do today is provide them with more like an advisory guidance that these are the kind of technology that will help your end users climb up the energy ladder. That is very essential. When you're doing something in terms of development finance, you're ensuring that is some level of upscaling, not just in the horizontal market by reaching out to more and more people, but you're also reaching out to more, enabling people to climb up the energy ladder or climb up the economy ladder,
okay,
where where you're enabling a low income household to move up to the lower middle class or to the middle class at
yeah,
some stage.
all right,
And one of the primary stages of doing that is giving them a choice of the energy that they want to use. Because the smarter choice, cleaner choice will always save you money in the long run.
okay. That's, I think, a very helpful and very positive exposition of the carbon market and the work that you are doing. I'm sure you could go on for long, but I think this is quite a bit, quite enough actually. And I think you have explained it very well. So maybe we'll catch up with you in 1 year to see how you are changing or adapting with the times and so on like that. So, but any final words from you?
Yes. So one of the key things that I'm doing right now is my target, which is a little more on the technical side, is ensuring the integrity on the carbon markets, because there has been a lot of questions by several companies whether is a ton of emission reduction actually a ton of emission reduction. These kind of questions related to the integrity. So I'm also starting an own endeavor, a platform which is targeted to ensure that people's trust, or rather the off-takers or the buyers' trust in the carbon market, can gain some quantifiable backing.
Okay.
So it's a concept. We are working on a white paper. Me and my partner on this is working. He's also the co-founder of Microenergy Credits, James Daly. So James and I are working on a white paper currently to come up with a technology-based solution which can reinitiate people's trust in the integrity of the carbon projects by giving them quantifiable data and giving them some infallible justifications to even to the carbon projects that, hey, when we are saying that we are reducing a ton of carbon from the atmosphere, we're actually doing it, and this qualifies all these criteria, and here is the data to support that. So that's something that we are doing. So from 1 year from now, if we are speaking and if the idea is adopted well by everybody, maybe we can talk a lot more about
All
how
right.
that
Yeah.
side of the technology is going and how people are adopting to this new set of markets. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Dr. Mathur.
Okay, let's say bye to the viewers. I will be back with another young person or an expert soon, and maybe we'll catch up with Prantik in a year. But for the moment, let's say bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.